gospel is the power of God unto salvation. Anything dead in your life, God can raise it up.
God is not going to tell you to do something that He Himself wouldn't do. Amen?
I met Pastor Bannister back in Barbados.
I met him when I think, before I was even 10. I remember, the funniest thing, I met him at school. He was my teacher.
Well, I first met him at Refuge Church of God, and I remember that he introduced me to the transportation ministry.
Well, I met him through a friend from back home, Gracia. Because we all went to Refuge together.
The idea of starting a church emerged over time, in that we were all members of another church who did not want us to return. Someone said, let us start a church in the house. Let's call it Bethel. And so prior to that, we were moving from apartment to apartment, like the people in Acts. And this problem started in November 1988. And then by April 1989, since they didn't want us back, God gave us this house. And part of that bargain I had made with God is that if you give me a house, I promise I will use the basement for a Bible study.
I think when we used to go from house to house, and it's then I realized that, he had a calling, because we met from house to house, everybody, different person spoke, but as soon as we got together, the more we met, I realized that, he was called to be the pastor.
I always, used to hear you always talk about the Lord, and was very interested in people's souls and stuff, So then after I went to the church, then I realized that, it was really serious about God.
He decided that he was going to go back to school. He was going to get his, master's or whatever he needed for, the teaching that we were going to go through. So he went to Bible school. And I think that was a good step if you were going to do something that, you get educated in what you're going to do, so that you'll be fully informed when when you're reaching people.
And so instead of the group moving from house to house, apartment to apartment, everything settled here at this address here on East 45th Street. And we would meet in the basement, and that is when the idea came. Let us start the church, let's name it Bethel. Now, how did I know that this was of God? Because I grew up in Barbados in the house, and the name of the house was El Bethel. And my dad being a pastor and being the chairman of the assembly of 20 churches, I figured God is having a pun on me, naming this thing Bethel. And they didn't know that. So I told the group, I don't want to be the pastor, but if God gives me a sign that I'm to be the pastor, I'll be the pastor. And so it happened that about a week after, Reverend Cosmo Springer was in the kitchen here in this house with myself. Everybody else went to work and to school. And the salesman came and he rang the bell, and he came and said, have you heard about this particular vacuum cleaner? I said, yes. My mother-in-law has one. It's very expensive. I don't need one of those vacuum cleaners. I can buy about 5 vacuum cleaners for that price. And so he said, are you a pastor? I said, what is that you ask? Are you a pastor? I said, what does pastoring have to do with a vacuum cleaner? He said, you got to be a pastor because I see an aura around your head shining. So that's when I called Reverend Springer, that time he was Brother Springer, to witness this particular conversation. And the guy repeated to him everything that he said and how I responded. And that was the confirmation. God sent a salesman to me, who was a salesman at the telephone company, to give witness that I am to be the pastor of this new church.
How I got connected to Brownsville Church of God was through my mom. My mom was a member of the Church of God in Panama. So when she came here, they already had given her Pastor Garrison number and for her to get in touch with the pastor. And that's how my mother came here first, and she attended first, and then I started to attend.
It started back in 1969. I came over to this country. My brother, Pastor Jeanette, was attending this church, so I just fall in by attending also.
So when my mom and I moved here, that was one of the first churches that she noticed in the neighborhood. So we walked over, we went inside, and she fell in love. She said that the worship experience was nothing like she had ever experienced, and since then, that's where we've been attending.
I worshiped or attended Brownsville Church of God my entire life. 35 Blake Avenue is the only church home I know because my parents got married there, and that is where I've been since I was literally in my mother's womb.
I used to attend an Episcopalian church. I wasn't happy with it and I wasn't learning anything. And Mr. Fisher invited me to Brownsville Church of God because he used to attend Brownsville. So I went there for a couple of Sundays and I was glad it was a Bible-based church. I liked it. I stayed there. I gave my life to the Lord there and I became a member.
We had benches. They were wooden benches. The fabric, the cushioning in the benches was maroon. They were worn. In some spots, the cushions were fading. On the outside, there was rusted gates. On the windows, on the doors. The building used to be a synagogue years ago, and I believe that the Star of David was still in the design on the gates. It was on, I think, the top of the building.
The basement, the way it was set up, it was inviting. The setup, I should say, to me was inviting.
Well, starting the church in my home at first, I was hesitant. Hesitant because it means now that more people are going to be in my house. People are going to be in my house on Sundays, on Wednesdays. It means then that I have to be more transparent.
My parents was quite transparent. I remember sometimes my tidy whities were hanged up in the basement. To go to the bathroom, they see our clothes that we were drying hanged up.
So that was my concern. People just coming in, and not only people that I knew that I was familiar with, but strangers. Because when people come off the street to the church, you can't come in now in my home. You have to be able to allow them. So that was my concern.
So there was certainly pressure to keep the house clean because there was going to be church on Sunday, and there was going to be Sunday school in our dining room. There was going to be church in our basement, and so there was certainly some responsibilities that we had to maintain the household.
It was quite interesting. I had to share my house. I had to share my snacks because Sunday school was in the kitchen and sometimes in the basement. Funny story is one time my dad accused me and my sister eating up all the snacks, and we had to remind him, remember, you served the snacks for Sunday school.
What I remember was the brown surrounding the basement. It had that brown wood in the basement. We sat on benches.
There was a bench around the perimeter, like an L shape, I think, bench. There were chairs stacked horizontally, and that's where we would sit for service. Sunday school was held upstairs. I don't remember if we were in the living room or the dining room.
I grew up going to a church, a building that looked like a church. And honestly, I think one of the challenges for me was I'm going to church in a basement. Who does that? But I humbled myself, like I said, because I was looking for something different. All right? And as I studied the Bible, the Holy Spirit led me to like open up my mind and started questioning things. So I went to the basement, I went to Bethel, and every week I came home from church, I was like tossed. Every time I went to Bethel, there was like this battle going on. And when I finally decided to go to Bethel, it was different. I was free, and I felt that freedom. I felt like a load was lifted off my shoulders.
We had people not only sitting around in the basement, but sitting on the stairs going down to the basement because there wasn't enough room. So when we got around 45 to 50 people gathering here, we said it wasn't safe because there was one way in and one way out. So then I had a friendship with the owner of a daycare on Avenue D. I had a friendship from him when he had a bus company and he was teaching at St. Mark's Day School. And so we negotiated and he allowed us to use his facility. And while there, we grew to 65 people.
The building was not in the best structural shape, and we owned 141 Tapscott, which is now the annex, but at that point in time, the building was a 6-apartment unit, and members of the congregation actually lived there. So we had members living there. There were 3 floors, 2 apartments on every floor. I would go into the building with my dad because he had to collect rent. And of course, because members lived there, I had friends that lived in the building. And then the basement was used for ministry. So that was our fellowship hall, for lack of a better term. It wasn't an actual hall, but it was the kitchen, and then there was the dining area.
All along while we were doing ministry at the Get Set place on Avenue D, I longed to leave corporate America. I worked for one of the top Fortune 500 companies. And I longed to leave there and get into full-time ministry. At some point, I developed migraine headaches, and I went to the doctor, and they couldn't determine what it was. So one day, when I got a migraine headache, I went back in bed and lay down, and a televangelist said, someone who is having a migraine headache just joined. And I want that person to know the migraine headache is not physical or medical. It's the enemy attacking you because God has a work for you to do. If that's you, call this number. I didn't call the number because I knew he meant me. So soon after that, Verizon came up with called a 6 and 6 package. It is the most beneficial package that the company has ever offered and up to now has ever offered. I took that package on the Monday, and my wife and I were talking about how are we really going to maintain the mortgage and pay for all these things. So I said, okay, if I have to go and do teaching per diem, I can do that. But the Thursday, the phone rang. And it was the pastor from that church, one of the ministers from Brownsville Church, that said, our pastor just resigned and went back to Belize. So we have 43 members who want you to come over. And we have a building. Will you be interested in coming to be our pastor? At that time, I was a pastor of 63 or 65 people. We had no building. It was a wonderful match.
We were in the daycare, so we were expanding. So it came in at a perfect opportunity, a perfect time, because we didn't know how long we would be able to use this daycare.
You feel like you're busting at the seams because people were coming, people were staying, people enjoyed the teachings, enjoyed the fellowship, because as a small group, you know, there were many Sundays where we just left the basement and went upstairs and we had lunch. Everybody brought a dish, we had lunch, we had gatherings, you know, so it was an extension of your family. So going over to Brownsville now, it was exciting because now you see this bigger opportunity, and whatever you have, you want to share with somebody else. So I was excited about it.
Well, in the beginning, I didn't think it was such a good idea because we, at Bethel, we had such a great relationship with, you know, one another. We were like family. So at first it was maybe a little skeptical. But then I remember Pastor Bannister always used to say, you know, that we have to branch out. So, you know, we can't stay like this all the time. You know, we can't get too comfortable. So, you know, as we go out, we meet we're gonna meet other people, and I know bringing other people, because it's about kingdom building. It's about, you know, winning souls. It's about winning souls, you know.
Pastor Emeritus and I used to be talking on the phone a lot about the merger coming up. I knew about it, and when the people that did know about it. So instrumentally, it was like Sister Gabriel, Sister McIntosh, myself, the Thomases, Brother Jack. We were more together trying to get that.
I remember there was a Sunday and it was our family at the church, and I believe my dad was preaching.
We drove up and Sunday school was still in session. Pastor got out, I got out with the kids. Sunday school was still going on. They sat us in the back. So after the Sunday school was finished, they escorted us to the second row with the kids. I felt like all eyes were on me.
That I was just kind of like, what is happening? Why is it happening? And because we were strangers, I felt like we were strangers. For the first time, I felt like an outsider. So before it was in our home, you know, like now we're in a place where there, like I said, lots of people I don't know. And so as as we're there and as my father's preaching, I think that I'm mostly observant.
But everybody's eyes look on me. You know, you wanted to make sure that you sit a certain way, you look a certain way, and then with the kids, you want to make sure that they're behaving themselves, they're not fidgeting, because everybody's going to be talking about the pastor's kids. So, yeah, I was a bit apprehensive, yeah.
I remember his first sermon when he went over to the Church of God in Brownsville. The reason why I remember, because I didn't think about him, I saw a beautiful, sexy young woman. I don't remember what my father preached about, but I remember that young lady.
Brother James also, he passed away. He was also instrumental. He was the one that decided to invite the other church over. And they came in for that Sunday. And that Sunday was the beginning. They never left.
There was a funeral that happened with one of the staunch leaders within that group. Mm-hmm. And so I had to do that funeral. Mm-hmm. I did the funeral, and then the question was, am I going to come back over to get set with the congregation, or use this as an opportunity to go over there and stay over there, not to give any room for the devil there. And so I consulted two of my mentors. They said, when you go over there and you do that funeral, don't you ever come back. So I did the funeral. And that Sunday was my first Sunday preaching over there.
Yeah, I had no doubt that he was going to be a successful leader. I heard about him leading the youth in Barbados and the scope of what he did. So I sort of used that as like a benchmark Although Bethel was very small, I know he could have done that. But the larger congregation, I use the knowledge of the planning youth group in Barbados and how successful it was. And so I thought that he had the expertise in terms of the management. I thought he was going to be very successful.
He has a lot of leadership skills, and I know that with his leadership skills, he can fit in anywhere. So I believe that he will be able to make it.
I thought it was a move from God, really, that God was in it. The anointing was on him. I think it's Jeremiah said, write the vision, make it clear. And he always said he got his vision from God, so the other members caught the vision.
I do believe that some people felt that the Bethel congregation was trying to take over when they came. That was not my opinion. Even though I was only a teenager, I did recognize that there were people in positions that didn't need to be in those positions. And so when the merger took place and there was a structure, order, and organization, some people could not do the things that they were accustomed to doing or function the way they were accustomed to functioning. And so they felt like it was a takeover, and I would even say that some people felt that it was a hostile takeover. But that wasn't my impression.
The Bible tells you that there should not be chaos in the house of God. So him coming in brought stability. And I believe that was God.
Well, out of the 43, there were some people who were skeptical about it. And so some of them left and went to the Church of God of East New York because they have relationships there, friends there. Of the many that remained, they had two people opponents. They said that you are not called to be a pastor. The pioneer pastor of Brownsville, he was called, and the pastor that just retired, he was called. So I consulted with them. They said that when they were there, they told him the same thing, that they weren't called. And now that they are gone, they're called. So, but I didn't need any affirmation from them, since I already had affirmation that I'm called. And so eventually I told those two persons, if you can't find me to be a good pastor, it would be better for you to go to some place where you can be comfortable with someone you can call a pastor.
He wanted to make it difficult for anybody to go to hell.
Well, going back to the Word of God, when God chooses someone, He reveals to other people. He reveals to us. And I felt that within me when that merge, or what you would call that coming together, happened.
When I first moved over to the Brownsville location, I felt confident in what I was about to do, because I had been at Bethel given opportunities to preach at many different churches. So I was comfortable in my skin in dealing with large crowds. Plus to working for the Fortune 500 company, I was a teacher and trainer of different people, and I also managed and led marketing group. So in terms of leadership and exposure, it wasn't a problem for me. Plus too, God gave me a vision as to why this church was declining. And He showed me in this vision a yard with bodies stacked up. And I asked God in this vision, what's the cause of death? And He said to me, murder. That the members were assassinating one another's character and gossip. And so I already knew what to preach. And God had assured me in that vision just like in the Ezekiel dream, these bones shall live. And so when I went over there, I already had crafted a series of sermons. So we had planned and prepared around the 65 people that when we get over there, let's hit the ground running. I remember, and usually a teacher, but I remember the first set of sermons, it was a preaching kind of tone. And as customary, at the end of the sermon, they would take you down to the door to greet people. And I would get responses like, "Pastor, I know you can see through me." People were very confessional and repentant. So I felt good about what God was about to do, because I had his promise in the dream as a visionary. So God doesn't lie. He accomplishes whatever he says he will do. I'm only the vessel being used by him. So things started to turn around.
Well, at the time, I was very young. And at our current church, we didn't have a lot of young people. We didn't have a lot of kids. And so it was exciting to see that there was a lot of kids coming. There were going to be a lot of young people. I would be able to have more friends at church, more activities for the kids. And so that was something that I was really looking forward to.
I didn't really have any expectations. I mean, like, I've always been like happy and excited or whatever. So I think I was just looking forward to what was going to happen, but I didn't really know what to expect.
I wasn't concerned about the ministry aspects of it, to be very honest. My focus was not like the focus of the adults. I thought it would have been nice to meet new people. I thought it would have been nice to meet new young people specifically, because most of the young people that used to attend Brownsville had already left, whether they went away to school or whether they just stopped attending church altogether. So I was more interested in meeting new people, making new friends.
The merger took place October 1998. In 1999, we had 20 candidates for water baptism. We had a lot of babies, between 6 to 12 babies dedicated per year, and the church was growing. He was involved in the community. We did GED classes, we did taxes, we had food baskets, we had health fairs, we went to retreats, and in the year 2000, we partnered with someone called Jamming Against the Darkness, and that was an outreach program, that we had at Madison Square Garden. And then in August of 2000, Pastor Jefferson Bannister and 16 other members went down on their first mission trip to Siparia, Trinidad. At Siparia, they did Vacation Bible School, they did evangelical services, and they dedicated a new church.
Like I said in the beginning, when we started the church in my home, it feels like you never have space. You're always in the spotlight. Because if anybody knows me, I'm not a guy that likes to be in the spotlight.
Everyone is so warm, everyone was so loving, everyone was so concerning, and so even if I missed a Sunday, someone would call to check on me.
I saw something totally different, and to this day, it brings tears to my eye.
Not knowing that I already had someone calling the police to say that there are people disturbing worship.